I'm EKW, and I'd like to share a bit about the book I've written called After Incest: Transcending Devastation and Embracing Vibrant Aliveness. My book is a mixture of my personal experiences, poetry I wrote as a means of self-expression, techniques I use to help myself and others heal, as well as personal and professional insights. I'm going to read a few pages from the book, so you might want to just sit back, close your eyes, and listen for about 7 minutes. Displacement. Displacement describes when someone has an emotional response that originated in one situation, but is being felt or acted out in a different situation. One clue that displacement is occurring is that the emotional response appears to be far larger than the situation calls for when looked at rationally or logically. During displacement, the individual is experiencing feelings from a previously unresolved experience and projecting them onto a situation in which it feels safe to express them. Immediately after I began writing this book, I was on the phone with an agent discussing a technical problem I was having with my phone, when the agent who was helping me got off the subject of my call. Recalling a time when he had a similar problem, he was telling me in great detail the steps he'd taken to solve the problem he had. I tried to jump in several times to redirect his attention to my problem, but he wouldn't allow it. He plowed on. At this point, an explosive anger surfaced in me, and I wanted to scream at him to shut up and listen to me. But I held my tongue, took some deep breaths, and waited for the feelings to pass as he continued rambling. It didn't pass until long after I got off the phone. The intensity of my anger in response to a relatively minor annoyance is an excellent example of emotions with a charge. This is what the psychology world calls displaced feelings. I've learned that whenever anyone is having displaced feelings, or a stronger response than the situation calls for, stemming from some hidden source that is yet to be acknowledged. After getting off the phone, I wanted to run home and hide. What the heck is going on with me? I wondered. The answer to my question was revealed to me that night in a dream. Really, a nightmare, full of symbolism that will become evident later as you hear how my family responded to my father sexually abusing me. In my dream, I was an adult, and my 2 kids, who were also in the dream, were very young. We had just been in a car accident. I had rear-ended my mom's van, and my car was pointing straight up towards the sky. My mom and dad were standing in the street looking at my wrecked car. My mom hooked a single powerful finger under the front fender and with superhuman strength put the car back on its wheels, all of which were shredded. The next thing I knew, my daughter and I were in the furthest back seat of my mom's van, but I somehow knew that my son was still in the wrecked car, and my dad was out there with him. I was trying desperately to get my mom to help me and to tell me what had just happened. I was frantic and panicking, and I also wanted her to tell me what was going to happen next. But instead of answering me, she continued driving and kept talking about things that didn't matter. My older brother appeared in the van's front passenger seat, and he began admonishing me for mistreating our mom, and then he stormed out of the van. I tried to settle down and speak more calmly, but I quickly became hysterical again. Still, my mom focused on her driving and ignored my panic. She was driving, but we weren't going anywhere. My anxiety about my son and my wrecked car brought my hysteria to a desperate level, and at this point, some part of me finally said, I have got to stop this. I woke myself up to find my heart beating wildly. The process of beginning to write this book triggered within me some unhealed injury, or perhaps I just bumped into one of my old scars. This was the true source of my reaction to not being listened to by the phone technician. My anger stemmed from desperately wanting my mom to listen to me and help me after I'd been abused. Yet she ignored me and my needs, and she went about focusing on herself. Now I understand why the rehabilitated incest survivors I was looking for when I was 23 aren't out there blowing their horns and shouting, "Follow me!" How could they hope to help other incest survivors heal without talking or thinking about the abuse that caused their agony? Talking about these things trigger the pain from the past and keep it alive. Eventually, even the triggers and responses to triggers don't seem all that important. This happens when the survivors have learned not to identify with their mind. But this typically occurs only after extensive practice. For years, I had quite a lot of unresolved anger and frustration with my mom. This was mainly because she encouraged me to displace my feelings and did not protect and take care of me when I needed her the most. Peter A. Levine, Ph.D., and school psychologist Maggie Klein say in their book, Trauma Through a Child's Eyes, trauma can result not only from catastrophic events such as child abuse and violence, but from incidents that generate effects that are often minimized. My mom not only minimized, unconsciously, she blamed me. In any case, my dream of rear-ending my mom's van held a lot of meaning for me. It explained my exaggerated anger with the phone technician. The main message from the dream was that I was still suffering from the pain I felt at my mom's unwillingness to listen to me when I went to her for help for the abuse. The second meaningful message was that I still carried a lot of fear and anxiety about how my children have been impacted by my experience, my son in particular. These two things, anger at my mom and fear for my children, have been ongoing challenges throughout my healing process. Certainly, there are other deeper spiritual meanings to the dream, but I won't go into those here. Next is a poem I wrote about my mom more than 20 years ago. During those dark, cold, gloomy days, I cried in a field with grass up to my knee. I looked from a distance at my mother, who sat oblivious in a winter tree. She sat on the branch that was nearest to the ground, and I called only to her for help because there was no one else around. After quite some time she came down, just for an instant to see if I wanted to come up and sit with her in her leafless tree. It was getting darker and darker, and by this time it began to snow. I told her with anger that no, I would not go. I was only a child, but I could clearly see it was a bad place for shelter in that winter tree. As she climbed back onto her branch, she thought I was quite bold. But I stood all alone on the ground, and I was shivering from the cold. If you'd like to buy the book or just visit my blog, please click the link below and we'll take you straight to my site.